Hello everyone and welcome back to Placing Faces, the show where we sit down with some of the most influential casting directors in all of Hollywood and across the entertainment spectrum. I'm your host Charlie Chappell, and today we sit down with director first, casting director second, teacher third, and genuine delight fourth, Risa Bramon Garcia. Risa's career is an exciting one, from directing 200 Cigarettes, The Con Artist, and more, to her casting work with shows like The Affair, Masters of Sex, Roseanne, and movies like SLC Punk, Speed, Twister, Natural Born Killers, and a film very near and dear to my heart, Benny and Joon. We met up with Risa in North Hollywood at the BGB Studio, where she and her partner Steve Braun, along with their staff, work with actors to develop each person's unique voice. Risa is a wonderfully open, blunt, and honest person who loves what she does, and it comes from a very pragmatic point of view. She started her career out surrounded by incredible creatives, including Shel Silverstein, David Mamet, Wendy Wasserstein, Lanford Wilson, and the effects of that sort of New York theater sandbox training ground is clear in her approach to the industry now. The funniest thing to me being that she thought that was just normal. She was a great deal of fun to talk to, enlightening to listen to, and I hope you enjoy her candor as much as I did. So, without me rambling on and on, let's jump right into it. I hope you learn as much as I did. First and foremost, she is a director.
I like that she is a director. We're leaning into it these days in the industry, saying she, so.
How do you mean?
Just women directing, women producing, women writing, women filmmaking, which is something that has been a struggle for women for many, many decades, and now it's being, a light is being put on it, so it's a good thing to hear.
Absolutely.
You say that, don't you think?
I absolutely think so,
Yeah,
and I want to delve into that and women in the industry, because your first film that you directed was 200 Cigarettes.
Yeah.
That was 1999, I believe. Mm-hmm. You had a crazy cast in that movie.
Yeah, they were all crazy.
Yeah, they definitely were, but they're also, like, the span of that cast is kind of insane to me, of who you were able to attract to that piece, because it's a really funny movie, it's a really heartfelt movie, and you've got, people from...
I'll just identify
please.
that for you, because
Please.
what is just interesting is, what I love the most is, I don't call it discovering people, because people are not there to be discovered. I'm a part of their journey. I don't find them or make them famous, but it was really fun to watch careers evolve from there, whether it was Paul Rudd or, Gabby Hoffman, who evolved later. She had many peaks of involvement, but now she's, what's happened to her, and Kate Hudson and Dave Chappelle. So it was fun to see what happened with those people, because at the time very few people knew who they were. So that to me is the coolest thing. It's probably the coolest thing about casting overall that I do, is to be able to be there at the beginning of somebody's career, directing Sam Rockwell in a play, and then watching his career and then watching where it's come to now. That's really moving to me, to be a part of that journey for people.
Well, okay, so you say you don't like the term discovering, and I get that, but you were there very early for some of these people in their careers. Sure, yeah.
But I think we were there early together, So to me, it's a collaboration. It's about finding the work together and discovering the work together. And then if there's talent and the stars align, then people, find their light and go on to become famous or have hearty careers or whatever. So for me, it's about being able to at least identify the talent, maybe put it that way, and be a part of watching that talent emerge and supporting it and championing it. But nobody discovers anything really.
But you still have to have your ear to the ground. You still have to be out there searching for discovery with your looking glass.
And you know what it is? It's just to me a response to talent. So when we were doing 200 Cigarettes, for example, we needed some through line to the story, and one of our producers told a funny story about how he had just gotten into a disco cab in New York, and it was like just walking into a 70s disco, and he described the character, and we all thought that's really fun. It'd be great to have that as people travel through downtown New York on New Year's Eve. And so we went to the writer, and she started conceiving it, but we were trying to figure out who was going to be this disco cabbie. And somebody had sent me a tape of Dave Chappelle for some other reason, and I just saw him, do his stand-up, and I just thought, yeah, that makes sense. He's super talented. And then some of the financing entities in the project were big fans of his as well at MTV. And so it was just an easy thing to just go, let's do this. And knowing that he could improvise his way through it, because those scenes were mostly improvised.
They were?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense, because he's very, very natural in those scenes.
Yeah, and everybody else went with it. So there was not a lot. Like, put him and Janine Garofalo in a taxi with an outline and just drive around and let him go. So, and then try to edit that. But... But that was the fun part, is to be able to see that, to go, to be able to put things together, a role, a concept, an idea, and an actor, be able to match those together.
Sure.
Or I did a general meeting with Kate Hudson, and just sat there and just looked at her and thought, this, I don't know what the actual acting chops are, but I know that there's DNA in there that's talented, and also just the essence of who she is, and the whole package was just so engaging, and it just made total sense. And the role of Cindy was in my head, and there she was, and just, so for me, I guess that's my part of my talent, or part of my work, is to be able to put those things together. And when it happens effortlessly, it's wonderful. It's often not the case.
But there are times when it does just fall into place, where it feels, this is right.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a step back and let's go to the beginning, where all great stories start. Where were you from, and how did you get into the industry in general?
People do it different ways, and I did not have connections or relationships, and I was born and raised in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. My mother's an American, so I was raised as a New Yorker out of New York.
While still in...
Yeah.
Okay.
But we spent a lot of time going to New York, and for me, the magic was going to see shows on Broadway and looking at that and thinking, this is what I want to do. And I've always wanted to... I never really wanted to be an actor. I always wanted to be a director from when I was a little kid. So I would direct plays of Batman and Barbie in my garage or in my basement with friends, and I directed the high school play, the high school musical South Pacific, and I did that because they decided that nobody was going to do it, because the teacher who had been directing them had left, and so they were not going to do a musical, and I just thought that was awful, and I went to the principal and said I wanted to do it, and he said absolutely not, and so I fought for it, and so I had my first experience of dealing with the hierarchy of an institution that said no, and so I fought the system,
And you won.
And I won. And
that set a precedence, huh?
And so I thought, this is how you do it. You just fight it and you win. And we had a lot of obstacles, and we were almost didn't open because we were students, doing plays, and it was tricky. But I remember standing in the back of the house on opening night and watching the show happen, and watching it be a success, and watching people applaud, and thinking, oh, this is what you do. This is how you make it. You make it happen. And from then until now, hundreds of years later, decades later, it's the same. I do the same thing. It's like, you want something to happen, you conceive it, you make it so. And so that was my first lesson. And also I found my tribe, because I didn't fit in with any of the other groups in high school, and you find your theater tribe,
Sure.
for those of us who know what that is, or filmmaking tribe. And I understood that I belonged somewhere, and I belonged with other people who were like me. Mm-hmm. And so from then on, it was all the same, no matter whether I was doing it at college or in the New York theater, or as I started casting in film, or when I came to Los Angeles. Or here at the studio that I created for actors, it's been the same process ever since.
Well, and you're a big proponent. I've watched a couple of interviews with you in preparation for this, of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, getting your shit done, working hard, and the idea that cream rises to the top.
Yeah. well studied.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's an important thing because it's really easy. I've been here. This is my 10th year in Los Angeles.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from Arkansas.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
A little farm in the middle of nowhere.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And coming out here, I was very similar to you in that I knew no one. I didn't know anything about the industry. I had just been studying engineering for the past 4 years and was like, no, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to go make movies. So let's go to Los Angeles and figure it out from there.
Yeah.
And these past 10 years have been a deep study in how to screw up, how to fail, how to go the wrong direction for way too long, and how to recorrect in the course.
And that's how we learn.
Absolutely.
Yes, by getting off the path in some way and then coming back to it or redefining the path.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk with you, though, about your early times in theater in New York.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of glossed over in a lot of the interviews that I saw. And that, to me, is super fascinating because, well, first and foremost, when I just walked in here, I walked past a signed poster for Fool for Love, which you were on the first production of.
Well, I was, as a young sort of smartass in New York, and I just was there to, it wasn't that fancy, but I loved the play and I loved the cast, and I was a Sam Shepard junkie. And so I, through knowing Ed Harris and Will Patton, and Kathy Baker, who were in the play, well, I mean, I think Will took over for Ed, but I just would go run lines with people and, soak it up. I mean, it's an interesting thing because I tell actors and young directors and my daughter, who's a young filmmaker, this all the time, which is, just get around people who know what they're doing, be around talent, learn by watching and observing and being a part of just soaking up the universe and the experience of people who know what they're doing, or at least who are talented and seem like they know what they're doing. And that's how I learned in the theater in New York. I was lucky enough to be mentored by Kurt Dempster, who had founded the Ensemble Studio Theater in New York. He's no longer alive, but he took me under his wing, and he was an incredibly difficult human being, but there was mentorship there, and it was
difficult in what sense, though?
He just was, with a lot of ego and just a challenging person to work for. It was a good lesson because I worked for a lot of
I feel like that is a good lesson to get early on, right?
Yeah.
To work with somebody who demands that you work at their level.
Yeah, but he was a bully about it.
Okay.
So, and that happens or happened a lot after that, which is, I wonder now how I really endured it all because there were so many of those people, and I probably gravitated toward those, bullying kind of guys in some way, looking for a strong father kind of thing, all that stuff. Yeah. Sure. But Kurt was that in a way, and he was a father figure. But the great thing about working at a certain level that he demanded in his mentorship also brought me into a community of fellow travelers, of other artists, of writers and directors and actors who were at an incredible level. And I didn't know what I'd walked into. I didn't realize. And suddenly you're working among Lanford Wilson and David Mamet and Chris Durang and Wendy Wasserstein and Horton Foote and on, and Vincent Canby, luckily, who wrote a play that Billy Hopkins, who was my partner at the time, casting and work partner, and I cast his play. And so when he wrote his review of Desperately Seeking Susan, it was either him or Janet Maslin, but I think it was him, just wrote glowing things about us because we were like family. So that was we didn't do it for that reason. We were working at the theater. And so I was among all of these people who were, I didn't know that they were fancy or that they were, and then people of my peers, coming up with Richard Greenberg and John Shanley and a number of people like that, and convincing Shel Silverstein to write his first play, and because he was a friend of a friend, and I just didn't know that wasn't normal. That was normal.
Sure.
So suddenly I'm in this world of talented people, and that was my university. That was my training ground. That is how I learned everything that I know now in terms of my values and my work ethic and my sense of of how to study and create work. It all happened in that environment, and I was fairly young, and that was formative, huge.
Do you think that the ignorance of who these people were and what they were either at the time or going to become in the zeitgeist of the entertainment industry. Do you think that served you?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And some of it was we came up together. Some of it was coming up together with them, and some of it was just all of us, being in the sandbox together. There was no distinction between, you're working on a Shel Silverstein play with Christine Baranski and Harris Yulin and Shel, and you go, okay, we'll just try to make work together. It never dawned on me that it was challenging, beyond the work itself, because everybody was there for the same reason, to just make great new work.
Do you see that happening in today's world like it was then?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is. I don't know what the New York theater environment is because I'm not a part of it. I miss it dreadfully, but I don't know what that is. I think it's very much what people are doing, and I see it happening in film, and I think that is the future of the film business, are the people like Greta Gerwig is being celebrated for, who are taking the industry back and saying,
Sure.
This is what we're, or Jordan Peele, who are saying, this is what we believe, what we want to make. And
hey, we've got stories to tell too.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great.
And I think that's a real lesson. And I love that was sort of one of the messages that came out of the Oscars, because this ceremony itself was fairly boring and predictable for the most part. It was not hard to win those Oscar pools, but it was that was one of the huge messages, was you've got to just make your own work. You've got to tell your story. You've got to find a way to have your voice and be willing to do the work it takes to get there and not stop. And I think that's an important, really important message this day and age.
And do you think the world is where it's easier to do that now, to tell your story?
I think it's easier on film. I mean, if I grew up with, the technology and the access and the ability to self-promote that people have now, I probably would have done more of that. I did it in the theater, because that's all I knew, and that's where I was. I came to New York to make plays, and I did that. But we couldn't, make movies that way at the time.
Sure.
And that wasn't that long ago. I'm not 100, but it's, it's...
Sure, that technology is really only a decade old.
Yeah. And getting more and more sophisticated.
Yeah.
So you can make a movie on an iPhone, et cetera, et cetera. And it's funny because I was talking to my daughter this morning, who's going to be a senior in college. She's at Wesleyan University, and she's a film student major, and she's trying to figure out what to do this summer because she's going to do a film thesis next year. And her advisor told her this morning, the most important thing is your script, and you need to spend your summer writing your script, whatever program you do, if you do a program. And he kept undermining the need for the technical aspect of it. And I feel strongly that she needs to have a technical foundation, so she understands lenses, and she understands, crossing the line, and she understands how, how to light a scene somewhat, just so she understands how to put a shot list together and actually shoot a scene and get her coverage and know how to edit ahead of time, before she gets in there. And she's making some smart decisions about she's going to shoot digitally, not on film. But what's really interesting is that for her, there are no boundaries and there are no limitations. For her, it's all about telling a great story, and why wouldn't you? And the world is my oyster. And maybe that's because she's 20 years old.
Sure.
But I think it's also because you have to be a warrior these days and take responsibility for the creation of your own work and the expression of your own voice and telling your own story, or stories that are important to you, because there's no other way to navigate the industry. And I think this generation is learning that, because that's their way of coming up against, oh, you can't get a job when you get out of college. Like, okay, fine. So I'm going to create my own stuff and figure out how to pay for it and figure out how to make a living, and that's always been the way we've all been in this business to some extent. We all wait at tables when we have to and do whatever we have to do to put that together. But it's now become the norm, and it's become something that I love that this generation is not taking for granted, but taking control of. I think that's different in that way.
What do you think are some of the factors in that? Is it because they have
survival?
Because there's so much more opportunity right now. There seems to be a lot more people chomping at the bit.
Yeah,
And
and also
you have to
also
fight.
there was a way that you'd graduate from college and you go to graduate school, or you would go get a job in your field. But I don't think people that generation of young filmmakers and young creators are thinking that's their trajectory. They think it's, I need to create my field. I need to define my career, myself.
Sure.
Because that's the way they're coming up against all the statistics that are saying you can't get a job after college. There are no jobs. So they're making their own.
And the opportunity is there to make your own.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
and I mean, with the advent of YouTube and even with all the changes that are happening with YouTube and Facebook,
Yeah.
the distribution part is now in your hands.
Yeah.
Which, when you were growing up, distribution was, there were 6 companies who did distribution, and
Right,
that's it. You had to
right.
go through them, or nobody
Yeah.
was going to see anything you
Yeah,
did.
yeah. It is different, and there's like 5 million film festivals, and and then one good piece of good work leads to another, and then somebody pays you for it.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to pay the rent. You still have to figure out how to pay for the film, but
But I like what you just said. Most people want to go straight to, some people pay me for it.
yeah,
I think it's very important that people know that you've got to make something and then show it to people, and then make another thing and then show that to people, and then make another thing
that's
and
right.
show that
Yeah,
to people.
Yeah, and keep doing it until somebody says, okay, here's some money for it. It's like what the Duplass brothers have been advocating for all along.
Absolutely. And Greta, and at the beginning of that movement too, which was the mumblecore movement, I think is what they call it.
Yeah.
That movement I absolutely loved, because it was them just going out and making something.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had problems with it because it wasn't technically this, or the technical aspects were.
Sure, yeah.
But they were telling their stories.
Yeah, and they can, all the technology you can figure out. And I say that to actors all the time. I mean, I coach actors all the time about their careers, and people really struggle with, well, how do I get seen, and how do I get an agent, and how do I get casting directors to see me, and how do I get in the room? And it's like, you've got to make some stuff. Even if you sit in your living room and write a monologue about, tell your story and shoot it, and it can be compelling and wonderful, or you can make something intimate and not that technologically challenging. And that's all people want. They want 2 minutes of great work so they can see you at your best. I mean, there's a whole other mentality about needing to be your best, and what does that mean? And I don't think actors are lazy, but I think that as a tribe, there's a certain amount of entitlement or fantasy about, well, I think I'm good. Why doesn't someone just give me a chance? Mm-hmm. Well, if you're really good, you're in the Olympics of acting here in Los Angeles. So you have to rise up and be at the top of your field. And the way you do that is you train and you grow and you do theater and you create and you make some great work that people will see and acknowledge. And that's all they need. And you do it because you love it. And eventually, hopefully, somebody sees that. And if you have to get your real estate license, if you have to bartend, as long as you are doing things that support that make you whole and happy and fulfilled, and you're in a creative space, then you're doing what you were meant to do. That's your purpose, and that's why you're doing this. You're not doing this to get a co-star credit on some network TV show that will be exciting to write home about and post on Facebook for 5 minutes. But that's not the reason. Yeah. And if you're doing it to walk the red carpet, take another look at it, because all those people walking the red carpet just want to be home watching the Oscars or the Emmys with their popcorn. So, it's an important lesson that we need to learn these days more than ever. And it's hard for a lot of actors who are like, I just want to act. I don't want to write shit, and I don't want to make stuff, and I don't, it's like too much work, and I don't want to produce my career. But you have to, in a way. You can't just sit around waiting for the phone to ring. That's too entitled.
Because out of, say, there's 100 people, the top 10, 20 are doing that.
Yeah, or they're super lucky, or they're super gorgeous, or they happen to just be the perfect blend of, somebody who is in the right place at the right time with all the right, parts.
Sure.
When I mean parts, I mean like just everything just fits, and they have access for a moment. But then again, when you have that access, you have to be able to show up and do the work too. Mm-hmm.
And be able to follow it up with something the next time,
That's
too,
right.
to
Yeah.
keep a career. Because there's so many times you see somebody who shows up and does something beautifully in one thing, and then the next thing they're either not ready for, or it's just the opportunity that they are met with isn't met with that preparedness.
Yeah, and that must be
necessary.
terrifying for like Timmy Chalamet, who's, what will he do next that we'll all be watching for, and hopefully he'll make some smart moves. But yeah, it's a lot. But that's a good problem to have if you're that guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's so many, yeah. So many young actors and writers and filmmakers and directors and who are lost at sea and once they find their purpose and their community and their way of creating and expressing themselves outside of being given permission by somebody who goes, oh yes, you may come in for this audition. Things change. Things really change. There's an actor I know who, has been really struggling with this for a long time. And as soon as she made her first short, her auditions changed. And then she started booking. Because she just said...
Was it just confidence at that point?
Yeah. Well, she said, fuck it, I'm just not going to be rejected because I'm to this or that. And
it's so that fuck it moment.
Yeah.
It really... And I have a teacher that I work with, have been off and on for a couple years now, named Sharon Chatton down in...
I love Sharon.
She's amazing.
She's part of the Ensemble Studio Theater in New York, and that's where she and I met, and we were all part of that tribe. Yeah.
Oh, I was just talking with her last night, and... I don't know. There was always something that she talked about that clicked with me about a year into studying with her, and it was literally the fuck it moment. And the next time I came into that class, the work that I was doing was 10 times better.
Isn't that interesting?
It was fascinating to me to see that.
That's cool.
And I don't know if there's any other way to get to that fuck it moment than by working with somebody who pushes you to that fuck it moment. Some people maybe can just... Some people maybe just have that naturally in them.
But I think you have to often either hit bottom or be pushed against the wall or just feel that frustration. And then if you care enough, if you're driven enough, if it's important enough, then you meet the resistance with fuck it, and you get through that door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's amazing to have those feelings and have yourself open up like that, and I think that stems from really good teaching, audition classes, and whatever it is that you can.
And doing it in a way though. Steve and I have been hearing. Steve Braun is my partner here at the studio, and we hear horror stories about people in class where ego is challenging them from teachers who are abusive or self-involved, and it's not about the work; it's about the teacher's ego, or it's about serving a technique, or being engaged in some kind of seemingly abusive relationship with somebody, and it's horrible. And I keep hearing the stories, and there have been many of those recently. Band-aids being ripped off of some of those people that are being revealed to tell actors to do things that are insane, and we do a lot of undoing here of that because. Like I did a career coaching with a guy today who started talking about branding, and because I really need to know, he literally used the word pigeonhole, like where I'd be pigeonhole. I said, listen, did you hear yourself? But he was told to do that by some person who sold a branding class to him, and I had to spend the time, a bunch of minutes, really undoing that and talking about bringing your, and I said, so let's not say don't brand, but let's redefine what branding is. Because if it's about bringing your full authentic self forward so that people get to see you and know you fully, that's different than,
than a manufactured brand.
Yeah, are you going to be pigeonhole yourself into this box where you are the nice dad or the psychotic pedophile, or like what are you talking about? And he really thought that he was supposed to identify himself in one way so that people would know how to cast him. I said, people are going to brand you and box you anyway. That's not for you to do. Your job is to be fully seen. I said, if I took a photo, because he showed me his photos, I said, if I took a photograph of you right now sitting there, I said, you would be seen. It's not going to be a sophisticated professional photographer's picture, but it's going to be you. And instead, these other pictures were generic and airbrushed, and he was lost in those. But there was the commercial happy guy, and then there was the edgy guy, and then there was the dad guy, and
trying to fit these square pegs in the round holes.
Yeah. Or just be a square peg. And be a bunch of square pegs. So it hurts my heart to hear stories of people who are misguided, and so much of that happens here because actors are so understandably needful of direction, and they want so badly to please and to be loved, to be seen, to be cast.
Well, it's such a vulnerable place that you have to go anyways.
And you need to.
Yeah.
And then you get taken advantage of. So it's a
and that's
tough.
A big hope with this show, is that having conversations with people like you and people who see all of these things can give insight into what it is that you're actually looking for, but also to cut out the bullshit, because there's so much bullshit. I've been here for 10 years and I've seen a lot of bullshit. I've gone down the rabbit hole of a manager saying, you need to know exactly the types that you're going in for. And having that knowledge, okay, sure, but he never once said, you need to be you. Right. I've always, there's always people saying that you need to change who you are, you need to drift this way or that way.
Would you say that to, Gary Oldman? Would you say it to Viola Davis? Would you say that to Allison Janney
Sure.
or Sam Rockwell? You have to go down. Yeah, sure. You could, I suppose you could type some of that. You could say, Sam is the weirdo guy, or the dangerous, and that's what he won an Academy Award for being a dangerous, edgy, weird guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he certainly branded that, but he's branded it as Sam Rockwell.
Absolutely.
He's not branded.
He's
not fitting into anybody else's box.
Exactly.
He's created his own.
And that's who
box.
he is from the interviews that I've seen of him. He is a weird guy, and he's a little bit like he makes choices based off of whatever he's feeling.
Yeah.
And that's
So
I wanted to read something off of your website.
Okay.
And it's along the lines of the fact that you're a director first, but you do a lot of things. So it says, I wear a lot of hats. I always have. Director, casting director, producer, writer of many sorts, teacher, and coach. I love being all of these things. I believe that this juggle of hat wearing, these assorted vocations complement each other, enrich each other, complete each other. The work remains fresh and passionate and always interesting. So first, from that, I knew we would get along well in this conversation, because I'm a jack of all. I wear a lot of hats. I love wearing a lot of hats. I get bored with just one hat. Okay. I need to switch it up, change the color, change the. What are some of the advantages for you of wearing so many hats? And as a follow-up to that, have you ever found yourself at a disadvantage because you were trying to do too many different things at once?
Yes. I'll start with the second part.
The second
first.
one's a much more interesting question.
Well, it's also more complicated, but it's sometimes, again, talking about branding or typing, people want to know who you are. So I had a hard time as a director when I was also casting and directing, when I am casting and directing, for people to say, wait a minute, like, we don't know if we want to hire you as a casting director because you're a director, and we don't want to have that. We want you to do your job and serve.
People want you in your lane.
They want you in your lane, and they're worried a little bit about ego, like I'm going to interfere with and I always have to explain, and I sometimes lead with that. Like, I remember when I came off of directing a movie a few years ago in Canada. I'm Canadian. I went back and did a film, and I came back and I really wanted to cast a pilot for some people I knew, and I had to go meet with them, and I knew them, and I said, look, I'm going to just address the elephant in the room. You're wondering, after directing a film, why would I come back and want to cast your TV show? And I said, and this is why. And I explained to them why. I just wanted to serve someone else's vision. I had been, up day and night at the helm of my ship for a year, and it was a really tough ride through a lot of storm, and I just wanted to be on someone else's ship and do my job really well and serve someone else's vision for a little while. And they heard, I said, I'm just going to address this because I know you're wondering. And they were so relieved that I said that, and we had a great creative talk, and I did the show, and we did the first season, and then we were canceled. But for that was because that was a decision that I made. But and I explained it, but sometimes people have a hard time figuring out exactly what lane am I in. For me, the fun of it has always been, going back and forth. So like for my years in New York, I would, and I'm doing that now, interestingly enough, here, almost the exact same life, which can sometimes be exhausting, where I would be casting during the day, and then at night I'd go to the theater and I would rehearse, and then I would come back, and then we would perform, and I would, it means you're working 8 a.m. till midnight, 7 days a week, which is really challenging. Certainly it remains challenging at this stage in my life. But so that's part of the compromise of what you have to do. But it keeps it.
How do you maintain yourself? In that?
Just some consciousness and self-care, and sometimes you don't. Like I'm exhausted right now because I was in class last night until 10. My class was 6:30 to 9:30, but we went till 10:30, and then I got home. I was all revved up, but didn't get to bed till midnight. I had to get up early. Today I'm here running the studio all day. I'm still casting on SEAL Team. It's a lot. And I can't give only a part of myself to it. So the last 7 months doing SEAL Team and The Affair and running the studio and teaching and parenting has been exhausting. And yet it keeps me, juiced. And I love the idea of being able to go from one to the other, because if I'm not doing something that is creatively stimulating and satisfying and energizing for myself and my work, then I'm not happy. And casting doesn't do that for me. I'm good at it. I like it. I like the producerial aspect of it.
As you were saying earlier, it's your bartending job.
It is my bartending job. And I've said that. I remember I said that in a New York Times interview several years ago, and several casting directors came after me and were really pissed off that I said that because it undermined what the work is. And I don't mean it that way. I'm good at it, and I like various aspects of it. But it's not the thing that is soul satisfying for me.
Sure, absolutely.
And teaching has become that for me here in the way I teach, because I teach as a director, and in some of my classes we make work together, we shoot stuff, to be able to hold space for young and not so young actors to find their voice as writers and filmmakers is the thing that makes me the happiest right now.
Sure.
And so that also then feeds the casting, because then I am a happy, creative, alive, individual, and then I'm able to bring that back to the casting world and with a certain amount of energy and vigor and freshness. And I don't get bogged down the way I know some casting people do, just beaten down by the process, because the process is what it is for there, and then I can always go back into the deep creative well of the other work, and one feeds the other. We have a bunch of teachers here at the studio who are also casting directors, and they also all say that for them, the teaching teaches them how to cast better.
Okay.
Because they're here figuring it out with actors, so they learn a new language and a new dialogue and a new way to get through to actors, and then they get really excited by actors growing and evolving, and then they can walk into the casting room the next day and be different beings, because then it's not just a grind. Then it becomes more, they can bring what they learned back into the casting room. The casting room becomes more of a place of discovery and collaboration than it might be otherwise. So there's, and then the casting for me feeds the directing and producing and teaching, and all of it starts to, sometimes it blurs, sometimes I'm like the hats are spinning and I don't know which one it is, but often it's just using different parts of yourself, and one feeds the other. And I think actors need to be doing more of that. They need to be hyphenates, as one calls it, because if you've got to be able to have many things going. And I've also watched so many actors here, watching them learn how to write and create stuff. I've watched actors find their voice as writers, which has been mind-blowing to see they didn't know that, and some of them are better writers than they are actors.
Huh.
And I say, absolutely.
But it's about that exploration of this art form as a whole, rather than just your sliver of it.
Yeah.
Well, I want to touch on the self-care that you talked about. Mm-hmm. What sort of things do you do, or do you recommend people do, to engage in that self-care when overwhelmed by everything that's going on?
Steve who is my partner here at the studio, has taught me a lot about that in terms of actual actionable steps that you can take. And we have created a thing called the 10-Day Actors Challenge, which is about the 5 elements of self-care.
Okay.
We're actually deep in the advocacy right now of those 5 elements again. So we've done 3 challenges. They were free, and we took people through them. So the 5 elements, because this will address what I believe is important. And every time I talk about it, every time we go back into it, I realize, oh yeah, that's right, I have to do that myself. Yes, that's right, that's right. So the first one is meditation. And it's a really powerful tool, and all actors need to know how to meditate. When you're in the waiting room, when that audition comes in and you have all that anxiety, when you're backstage ready to go on stage, when you're walking on set, you need to be in a place where you can, find your center and let your breath guide you and tune out any forces that are going to distract you and keep you from connecting to who you are, where you are, what you need in the story. So that's a huge thing, and it addresses a lot of anxiety that comes up for actors in auditioning and in their careers. Also, it's a place of contemplation where you get to, amazing stuff can come up. And if you're willing to sit in meditation for longer than 5 minutes and fight the resistance of the voices and the anxiety and all of the distractions, you're going to come up with some great shit. Things are going to emerge. So I do a lot of that discovery in the shower. It's a place where I do it. Some people do it in their cars. But in meditation, I've never meditated for more than 15 minutes and not had moments of aha or discovery of some kind or creating something out of that. So I think it's a massively powerful tool. Mm-hmm. The second element of the challenge is writing. And it's mostly journaling that we talk about, and hopefully right after you meditate. So I'll send you the challenge.
Please,
so you
I would love, yeah.
You can have and our challenge is a guided meditation with me.
Okay.
Each day, and we start at 5 minutes, guided meditation, then the actual meditation is 5 minutes, and then we grow it up to 15 minutes over the course of the 10 days. And Steve does an intro. And then the writing portion is a journaling. It's like very much like the Artist's Way morning pages, where you just dump onto the page, handwritten, everything. And it's often great to do it right after you meditate. So you're all that stuff that's been percolating, and and I do it in the beginning of class often, especially when actors are coming in and the world is still with them,
and
they're
frazzled and
traffic
killed them, and
a lot going on. So we did that. I did that last night in class, and it just took an extra 20 minutes, but I felt like we all needed it, and so I took them through a guided meditation on purpose, and then they wrote. And I had them write for 7 minutes straight, and just on yellow pads, and a lot of stuff came out. And then that was a great preparation for the work that we did. It put them in a very centered and emotionally connected place. So we advocate for that, for journaling, doing it all the time, wherever you can. So, if you're sitting on an airplane and they're defrosting the plane and you're sitting on the runway and it's hot for 45 minutes, instead of sitting there on your phone trying to, find people on Instagram, why not just take out a journal and just dump and just process and, and see what comes up, because you're going to come up against all kinds of wonderful resistance, and out of that things will grow and be discovered. And then writing also to take it to the next place of creating something, writing something.
Yeah.
And every writer knows that most of what you write is shit, so just write.
Absolutely.
So
and
you might as well just write.
Get through that shit.
The third element is connected movement.
Okay.
So it's not lifting weights or, jogging fast. It's about doing some kind of movement that connects mind, heart, body, spirit. So it's Tai Chi or Qigong or walking or sweeping or dancing alone in your room or yoga, or some kind of meditative movement to just connect yourself to yourself. Very important
So
to do.
connecting the physical with the emotional,
And
with the spiritual.
Yeah, mind, body, heart.
Sure.
Yeah. And to find a way to do that. If you don't have, like when we do it for the 10 days, if you don't have something organized, then just walk.
What of those do you do?
I do yoga. I do some Qigong with Steve because he teaches it. Sometimes I'll just close the door to my bedroom and put on music and dance,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes just walk.
Okay.
really important. And it's not about your abs.
It's not lifting in
yeah, it's about your being. And the fourth is acting or creating. So to make sure every day you do some kind of acting. And it could be anything from, reading a monologue or reading somebody's blog to writing something to going to a class to getting together with a friend and just reading something out loud to reading a screenplay. Could be anything. Doing a self-tape, whatever you can do to act that day so you can say, today I acted. And we've expanded that to be creating. So anything you can do to be creative in any way at all.
So whether that's writing a script or working on a draft of a script or
writing a blog
or
painting a picture, taking a photograph, or, tending to your garden or cooking something, as long as you can identify and say, I am creating something. Because again, your creative spirit is then being stirred up and stimulated, and that affects everything that you do.
Sure. Because you don't want it to settle to the ground. You want it to keep in the air.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're not doing that, then you're in a grind of life, and it can be very, very debilitating and depressing. Mm-hmm. And the final of the 5 is a huge one for us, which is giving. So you need to do an act of giving every day. And it can be, I remember when we did the first challenge, and I did it along with everybody else, because we had about 2,000 people doing the first one, and I thought it would be weird to listen to my voice, but it was actually okay. And then the giving thing was, it brings you to consciousness. So I'm in the parking lot at Trader Joe's, and some woman is struggling across the way to get her bags in her car. So I just stopped and went and helped her put her bags in her car. And she was so appreciative, and I felt great. And I thought, here I am being conscious about coming out of my own little bubble, which we are so in our bubbles in these days. In LA, we feel it in our cars and on our computers, and everywhere in the world, it's some version of that. And having a human connection, because I just had the consciousness, awareness to give something in that moment. So it could be anything.
Yeah.
And that, to me, also translates into the work that you do. So what about walking into an audition room in the spirit of generosity, to be able to offer something of yourself, to be able to say to those people in the room, I got this. This is where this lives in me. This is me having my own version of this. So I'm going to offer that to you, and as a fellow collaborator, see if that resonates for you. If it does, great, fine. If it doesn't, I can adjust. If not, I'm out of here, and good luck. And really do this from a place not of need and desperation and wanting people to take care of you, but from a place of giving and generosity, and dealing with the industry from that place.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so those are things that we advocate for and have actually organized, and that I have to keep reminding myself to do every day. I looked at my shelf of journals, because someone in class last night said, oh my God, I've got a shelf of journals that are uncracked, and I need to, why am I doing that? I said, I have that same shelf, and I went home and I took a journal out and started writing again. So it's really important. People do gratitude journals before bed, whatever it is that's useful. It's such an incredibly powerful tool for everyone, but for all of us as artists, and opening our hearts and our guts, and being vulnerable and needful in an industry that's fairly indifferent, and in a world right now that's incredibly violent and scary. We have to take care of ourselves, and those are ways that I believe you can do that. Just little steps every day can make a huge difference.
That's great.
And when I'm on the bike in the morning, I have to stop watching Rachel Maddow, because it's not
gets
that,
the blood pressure up a little.
Yeah, I'm like, why am I? This is not what I call connected movement here, because I don't go fast on the bike, but I'm on the bike for 20 minutes, and I thought, I've got to be watching something else, not this, because it's very upsetting.
I recommend Bob Ross.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a great way to connect. He's on Netflix right now, and that's been one of the things that I've been watching.
Really?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
One, because his voice is meditative in general.
Yeah.
And he's just a wonderful human being.
Got it.
But no, I thank you for all of those
And I know
things.
that I said, that's a lot to say, but I think it's really important to get really specific, because our lives go by so quickly, and our days are gone, and we have good intentions, but before you know it, it also creates a certain discipline, I think, as
Discipline's
huge.
very big.
Yeah, we've got to find a way to structure ourselves enough to have the discipline to get shit done.
Because when you're an artist,
Yeah.
you know, smoking weed and hanging out with your friends talking
playing
about
video
movies
games,
is real easy to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to go into a couple of the projects that you've worked on. Honestly, we could probably talk for hours and hours, but I don't want to kill you today. First, it's not first on my list, but I want to talk about it first because I watched it last night, and it is literally one of my favorite movies, Benny and Joon.
Huh.
It is
interesting.
I
call it the bathroom movie.
The bathroom movie.
Because I did it because I wanted to renovate my bathroom, and it paid for the bathroom renovation. I was talking to my husband about it because I said, we have to renovate our bathroom years later. And he said, yeah, how are we going to pay for it? I said, well, Benny and Joon paid for the first bathroom renovation. I'm not being cynical, but that's why I call it the bathroom movie. I love that movie, and I love the cast.
The cast is wonderful together.
Yeah.
You've got Johnny Depp, Mary Stuart Masterson, William H. Macy, Aidan Quinn, who you've worked with a bunch, Julianne Moore in just this wonderful little part for her, Oliver Platt. I guess I have to ask the obvious question first of how you got involved with the project and who was attached before you were involved.
I think Johnny Depp was attached. I think that was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's him. He's coming off of the back end of 21 Jump Street at that time and had done Edward Scissorhands right before.
Yeah, so he was an emerging star.
Sure.
Yeah. And Mary Stewart, Aidan came in at the last minute to replace somebody. So there was somebody who fell out, but it was everybody else just it was a fairly quick process. Jeremiah Chechek was the director, and he loves actors, and I knew the producers, and it just felt like the kind of movie Billy and I did, and Heidi Levitt did it with me here in LA as well. That just was quirky, and felt like right up our alley.
It is.
Yeah. So
quintessential '90s quirky for me.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess. For me, I'm curious about Mary Stuart Masterson.
Yeah. Well, nobody read for that part.
Nobody read for that?
Well, no, that's not true. We offered it to her.
Okay.
She didn't read for it. But, Billy and I have known Mary Stuart Masterson for a really long time. We had cast her in, I think, maybe her first movie. Sean Penn and David Strathairn and Chris Walken.
Oh, yeah.
And At Close Range.
At Close Range.
Sorry, I just had to sort of see it in my head. Okay. So Billy and I, Hopkins and I, who was my casting partner, had cast her in At Close Range. And it was one of those wonderful moments where she literally walked in the room and lit the place up. And we sent her to LA, and where Jamie and Sean were at the time. And she walked into Jamie's house in the Hollywood Hills, and the same thing happened. And so we knew her fairly well. I think Billy directed her in a play, and so we knew her depth and her emotional life and her sensitivity and her beauty and all of the things that were right for that. So that was a pretty easy feel.
Sure.
And she had some kind of name at that point, which we needed. The movie needed a little more of that to sell it. So we just, hoped that she would understand the complexity of that character, which she did, but we knew that she had that in her.
When you get to that level, as a casting director, you're looking at these people. How do you know that they're going to be able to execute?
You don't. You just hope. When they're at that level, you just hope, and the role is defined by who they are, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
Sure.
You don't always know. So often when people are cast in things where it is an offer, you take a risk, and it works or it doesn't.
So another film, there's so many that I want to talk to you about. Sneakers. I rewatched again yesterday.
Yeah.
God, that movie's good.
It is.
It's
a good
so
movie.
wonderful.
Yeah. Great group of people.
Yeah, and such an eclectic cast.
Yeah, and really smart. The whole thing was so smart.
Extremely.
Phil Robinson is one of the smartest people in the world. He's wrote and directed it. And Walter Parks was the producer, one of the producers, and everybody involved in that was so freaking smart.
And you can tell.
Yeah.
Because from the dialogue to the execution of the movie to the twists and turns throughout the movie. I mean, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, pause, go watch it, come back.
Yeah.
It stars Robert Redford, Sidney Poitier, Mary McDonnell, River Phoenix, David Strathairn, Sir Ben Kingsley, James Earl Jones, Dan Aykroyd, Timothy Busfield, and Donna Logue. And there are more.
Yeah.
It seems in this time you were kind of in a boom in your casting. Mm-hmm. When you're putting together an ensemble piece like this, what are some of the different things that you're having to balance as different people join a cast like this?
Well, it's finding a group of people who feel like they're of the same world and yet unique and idiosyncratic enough to hold their own.
Mm-hmm.
So to talk about branding, these are people who are not brandable. They create their own brand by just being who they are. So being as specific and individualistic as each one is, and yet believing that they are all, of course, Ben Kingsley was the antagonist, but believing that they all are part of the same universe and that they would complement each other. And you just don't know, but you're working collectively, collaboratively, which is ideal and often not the case anymore because things are done in different ways now. I think filmmaking has, to some extent, has become a little more about marketing.
Sure,
although the integrity of smaller movies is still what it is, which is why movies like Three Billboards and Lady Bird and other movies like that are so great because they do have the integrity of that kind of work. But in that spirit, and that was a studio film, you're collaborating with people who are so smart and talented, and all of your sensibilities are merging, and it just all works.
Yeah.
But it felt like that from the beginning.
Who was attached when you came on?
Redford.
Okay.
That was it. Yeah.
And then from that, you start building out all of these different roles.
Yeah. And some people read for it, but mostly they were offers, and people liked the script and liked the genre and liked the fact that it was Redford and liked, it was a pretty elite group of filmmakers.
Yeah.
So it was not that it wasn't hard. It was hard, but hard in a different way, hard in a great way. I really loved those days of those kinds of collaborations, and also because we did not have the internet, you couldn't show people. It's like if 40 people weren't weighing in on auditions or on ideas, because nobody had access. You couldn't watch people's reels. You couldn't check people out. You just have to go, I saw them in a movie once. And when you'd put people on audition, when you tape people for auditions, you'd have these clunky VHS tapes and you'd have to make copies of them, and then you'd put them in FedEx envelopes and send them to another city or wherever. And people didn't really get to, watch auditions in 2 seconds the way they can now, and suddenly somebody's assistant is weighing in on some audition that somebody does, and there are 400 people who have something to say about it. So there's not that kind of, which is more the case in television than film, but a marketing department is not weighing in on that other than this person would look great on the poster. So there was a little more integrity to the process then, because people did not have access to the work. You could pick up the phone and when we were working in New York and call the studio in LA and say, this is what we want to do, and they'd go, okay, and they'd try to find a photograph somewhere in their files of that actor if they didn't know who that was. But it was a gentler and in a way more virginal time in the process.
Sure.
Yeah. Or at least that's how I'm remembering it. Maybe I'm just blocking out all
the terror,
all the crap. But there was.
So I want to switch gears for a second and talk about your directing. Another movie I watched yesterday.
Wow, you're a busy boy.
I was.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part about this show. I love movies. That's why I got into the industry in the first place.
Yeah.
I watched The Con Artist.
Oh my God! Why?
Yeah. Okay. Multiple reasons. One, because I love Ross of Sutherland.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
I think he is extremely talented.
Yeah, I do too.
I would like to see him work more. We actually, on another show that we produced, we interviewed him a little while back.
Oh, good.
And he was just lovely.
I love him, yeah.
For those of you who haven't seen it, it is the story of Vince, a parolee after 5 years in prison for a heist. When he gets out, he's forced back into a life of crime while finding solace in creating sculptures in his boss's chop shop. An art dealer finds his work, and a new possibility opens up for him in life.
That sounds good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I want to see that movie. Whatever that is.
So it sounds like there's some stories behind the scenes on this one. Yeah. I'm curious about a couple things on it. What was it like working with father and son.
Complicated.
I guess we'll leave it at that.
Well, no, I mean, the problem with that movie was we never had a script. And there was one point when Donald wrote Sutherland wrote a version of the script and called me and said, I've written my own version of this. I want to drive it to your house and read it to you. And it was like, we probably should have made that version. It was so out there. And we were all, I mean, there was one night where it was like, we were up in Ontario in a town outside of Toronto, and it was the middle of the night because we shot nights a lot, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes not. And Rebecca Romaine and Rossif and I were literally at 3 a.m. in the pounding rain improvising a scene because, I mean, the great fun of it was like I would write shit and we would shoot it, and I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on here, but we never really had a great script. And we were working with the Canadian, maybe I'm talking out of school, but I don't really care. In Canada, a lot of the financing comes from the government, right, from Telefilm Canada. And we had $5 million from Telefilm Canada to make this film. And I remember saying, why don't we just wait until we have a better version of the script? But they had allotted this money for us at that particular time in the year. And you're working with the government. And if you say no and you don't take the money, they'll give it to someone else. Yeah. And then you'll have to reapply and start all over, and you may not get a slot come the next round. So the mistake I made, which was not trusting my instinct, was not going to writers I knew to rewrite it, who would have maybe done it as ghostwriters. They would have gotten paid something, but they wouldn't have gotten a credit, and I just didn't think people would do that. And so I didn't, we had 5 writers on that script, and it just got worse and worse and more diluted and more confusing and more convoluted. And then we went over budget, and so they pulled days out, so we weren't shooting things. And so when I watched the first assembly, I was like, this movie makes no sense whatsoever. And then I got fired off of it, and then I got rehired onto it, and then it was like the whole, I mean, in post, I got fired in post just because it was a total mess, and the editor became a friend, but he kept me in the loop, and then I came back on and I finished it. And it was not a pretty experience. It was one of those experiences that just sours you to the whole thing. And I loved the cast, and I loved a lot of what we did, but you cannot make a movie if you do not have a script. And we did not ever have a script.
Well, that
was the craziness of it.
Yeah.
And we were writing all the time. And Donald and Rossif and my husband and I wrote together a bunch. And my husband's not a bona fide professional writer, but he's talented. But I mean, anybody who wanted to write anything, I was like open to whatever could happen. So that's one of those situations you just don't want to be in. If it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage.
Sure.
And that was the case.
Yeah.
And Donald and, Rossif I learned a lot from Donald. He's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant artist.
Absolutely.
But also very demanding and challenging. And
because he's aware that he is Donald. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but again, you're working with like nothing that grounding you. There's nothing supporting you. There's no story there, really. So.
Well, what's interesting to me about your reaction to it and this part of the conversation about that movie in particular is one of the themes that I landed on was the struggle of being an artist.
Right.
And
okay, good.
There is a theme in there, I swear.
You say so. Yeah.
My question originally was how personal that aspect of fighting to be an artist.
Yeah.
While being pulled in a different direction. And
well, it's interesting that you say that, because that's probably in my recollection, when I pull back the scars, that was the core of what we were trying to do. The issue was, the storytelling of that.
Sure.
That got messy. There was a whole other storyline with his mother, which was, she was played by Mary Walsh. She's this wonderful Newfoundland actress in Canada. And it was a whole other storyline, and she and her lesbian girlfriend, and they knew Donald's character, the uncle, from another life, and they were trying to protect Rossif's character, Vince, from the uncle, and we cut out their entire storyline.
Yeah.
We'd shot like 10 scenes with them. And even we went back and reshot a scene with them because the film was damaged, and all of that went away. That whole world of and that was really fun. And Donald's version, that was huge. The mother was a huge part of it, and she rode a motorcycle. I don't know, it was like crazy. But we shot some scenes with the mother and her friends and her lover and Rossif, and then we just pulled it out because it just didn't serve. And I don't know. The movie's now 12 minutes long, but.
Well, I think we're getting close to an hour now.
Okay.
I did want to hit one more question, because we haven't really delved too much into your casting. You've worked with some of the best filmmakers out there. You worked with Oliver Stone a lot. You worked with Catherine Bigelow, John Hughes, Tony Scott. Are there any tying factors that you see of that caliber of director? Anything that they all share, personality traits or vision, that you think contributes to their success and ability to tell a story that really captures people?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things that are at play here. Ego is one of them, and not necessarily, I mean, sometimes bad ego, sometimes good ego. What I mean by that is just a real drive to articulate their very specific, strong point of view. Okay. And I think that's huge for people, because point of view as actors, as writers, as filmmakers is so, so important to really know how you feel about things, what you believe in and what story that is personal to you. And certainly Oliver's stories were all hugely personal to him. And always, sort of father-son struggles every step of the way. And I think with all of those guys, and Catherine Bigelow to some extent, and I didn't work with a lot of women, there weren't a lot of women to work with. There was in some ways that the testosterone, was charged, and the sort of this go to war mentality and tell a story with incredible conviction and purpose was always part of the work that they did. And I think that is something, and you see it in the films now, and people who are winning, even in a more gentler way, when Guillermo del Toro talks about filmmaking and about what it takes to really make something. You've got to come from a place where there's deep belief and a really strong need to tell a story, and then it becomes a personal. The ego part is this personal drive to succeed in that. You need to have some of that in order to survive, in order to rise above the norm, the mediocrity. You've got to find your way to, burst through the level of normalcy and mediocrity that exists in this industry. And the way to do that is to have this incredible drive and need to tell a story with an incredibly strong point of view. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, Angelina Jolie's made a bunch of movies that probably are not, successful for whatever good reasons they're not successful for. I don't know what or why, but, at least she's, she'll get behind them with incredible conviction. And I think that's what all of those filmmakers share. And they do it in all different ways. I mean, one of my favorite directors I've worked with is Adrian Lyne, and he always came, I mean, he was an artist more than anything, but he, watching his sense of purpose and his clarity and his incredible drive was one of the things that was the most affecting to me. So that, and I was lucky enough in my early years. So nobody told me that casting directors didn't go to the set. So on Desperately Seeking Susan, I went to the set almost every day until someone said, you don't have to be here. And I went, oh, okay.
But can I?
But can I? And so but then I would, at Oliver and Adrian were very generous in letting me be on set and, watch them work, and being there with Adrian when Michael Douglas and Glenn Close were working, and watch how he worked with them. And that was a very unique way, because he got in there with them, and he was incredibly engaged with them, and it was like metaphysical. And so that was amazing to watch and be a part of. And I learned from that, or being with, working with Oliver and having Bob Richardson, who was a cinematographer for years, teach me. And he would talk to me and go, why are you doing that? And how's that working? And what's the lens you're using? And that, to me, that was really fun and exciting, because I had ambition to be a filmmaker. And so
And your curiosity served you extremely well.
But I also didn't know I wasn't supposed to be there. Like, oh, I'm not supposed to come here, And then because of my involvement in that stuff with Oliver, I produced a couple of films because I was such a big part of the filmmaking for a couple of films. So I really relish and cherish those times, and it's what we started talking about. I encourage all young artists or emerging artists, even if they're not young in age, to just soak it up where you can. Get in there. I have a friend who's observing on every set she can. She's a young filmmaker, and I love that she's doing that because she's learning by doing, but also by just soaking up what great people are making and not so great people are making. So it was a huge part of the formation of my sensibility and my work ethic and my ambition and my sense of purpose. Was it being able to be a part of those films and be a part of the creative process, not just being back in the casting office.
Sure. So I think we've got to wrap up. Is there anything that you'd like to promote, to tell people about, where to find information on you, where to follow you on social media?
Sure. Follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at Risa, RISABG.com, or RisaBG is my handle. But mostly where my love and my heart and my work is right now is here at the studio. You're in it right now. This is actually the casting room that we're in. It's also a classroom. And it's the BGB Studio, and where we teach revolutionary acting training, at least we think so, and where we're here to serve actors and hold space for them to do their best work. And that can be found at BramonGarciaBraun.com, or just Google the BGB Studio and our website will come up. And what I love also is that we have on the site a blog that has audios, podcasts, and blogs for actors that is just, there's great stuff there to inspire and guide, and there's some good intel. And so we keep writing that stuff for actors just to be able to support and encourage and grow actors in whatever they need.
That's great.
Yeah. Any
parting advice to, actually, I'm going to sneak in one more question. Any parting advice to women in the industry right now?
Oh, yeah. Take advantage of this moment and rise to it. And it's an incredible time for women, and if it had been like this for me even 10 years ago, life might be different. And I have no regrets. I'm so happy where I am, but I know that people are desperate to find women directors and filmmakers and women's voices. So if you are a woman, dig deep and find your voice, and there is a welcoming carpet being thrown out to you. And so make work, articulate your voice, tell your story, and don't stop until it's heard.
That's a great way to end this. Thank you very much for having us in your studio today.
Thank you for being here.
And everybody, check out all the links. They're going to be in the description. Thanks for listening, and we will be back next week. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Risa. Do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, love, heart, thumbs up, and share so we can keep making this show. Without you guys, there's no reason for us to be making it. So please, share it around. Tune in next week when we sit down with John Papsadera, who you probably do know as the casting director of a slew of movies that you love. Dunkirk, Jurassic World, Interstellar, Transcendence, and the Dark Knight trilogy, maybe those. That's just a few. It's a really, really fun conversation, and John was great to chat with.
And so the same thing with the Joker. I think a lot of actors were intimidated about, well, I don't want to do some version of what Nicholson had done because that's so iconic. And Heath came in, had a meeting with Chris, never read, had a meeting with Chris, and he was fearless. He didn't have those same fears about it. He was a guy that was like, put his hand up and said, oh, I can do this.
Placing Faces is powered by Collaborator.com, a media production service connecting media professionals to companies, brands, and agencies, allowing you to scale your production based on your needs. Video professionals find work and companies save money. We'd also like to thank our partners at the Casting Society of America for helping to introduce us to so many of our guests. They also serve as a hub of information about this branch of the film industry. To learn more about the Society and what it takes to get into casting, you can visit their site at castingsociety.com. If you're a casting director and want to be a part of this program, please email us at contact@placingfaces.com. Thank you so much for listening. It is our intention to keep sharing the stories of these casting directors every single week for the foreseeable future. So don't forget to tune in.